Milwaukee Public Schools will get a major investment after voters decided to approve the district's funding referendum on Tuesday. Plus, President Joe Biden will make a stop in Wisconsin next week. CBS 58's Emily Fannin, WisPolitics editor J.R. Ross discuss that and more in tonight's Capital Connection.
We're going to look at some of the key takeaways from Tuesday's election during this show, JR. And we're first going to start with the most expensive referendum that was on the ballot. Of course, we're talking about the $252 million referendum for MPS that was passed by a majority of voters on Tuesday evening. But I think the question ahead is how many more times will Milwaukee Public Schools, other school districts, have to keep going back to voters and ask them for, raising their property taxes, or, hey, can we pay for building improvements? Looking at MPS, though, they say that this is going to help with teacher salaries, pay for art teachers, music teachers. But the message from Keith Posley, the superintendent from MPS, said, hey, thank you for passing this, but if things aren't going to change with the school funding formula going forward, they're likely going to have to keep asking for more and more.
So let's first look back a little bit, and kind of every campaign that I've covered, every issue I've covered, there's always finger pointing after when you lose. And the kind of takeaway I got from talking to operatives this past week was that the messaging was off from opponents of the referendum, in part because you had the business community, particularly the Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce, kind of leading the charge against the referendum. But the face of that became President Dale Kooyenga, a former Republican state lawmaker. Well, once you add a former Republican as the face of the campaign, people put on their partisan hats. You kind of being reflexive, right? Okay, Republicans want this to pass. Democrats kind of start going, oh, these guys from the suburbs tell us what to do. Also, you're talking about people from the suburbs telling people in a majority-minority city, kind of, hey, you shouldn't raise your property taxes. Maybe you could have been a better messenger. People have argued to me somebody from the city of Milwaukee as the lead kind of like advocate against the referendum. So there's that kind of second guessing going on. Looking forward with MPS, the question is going to be, does the closest referendum change anybody's mind about how to operate going forward? We know that the district has 32% fewer students now than 2 decades ago. Will they right-size the district, its footprint with buildings? And some people who were on the opposing end of the referendum are saying, okay, the district now has a change. They should see this as a message of change. Don't know when you win, you change. Also, their advocates say, look, this is not Milwaukee's problem, this is a state problem. If Republican lawmakers in the Capitol would heed Governor Evers' calls for funding education, we wouldn't have these referendums. Now, Republicans push back, always saying, look, they've learned a lesson that the more you put in to school districts, the more they raise their property taxes anyway. It's a never-ending battle. I don't know it's going to change the dynamic in the Capitol, but definitely something to watch going forward, especially in the next budget in 2025.
Now we're going to take a look at the presidential race. Of course, no surprises there with former President Donald Trump cruising to victory, same with President Joe Biden. But some of the, headlines looking more into the results there is that both candidates lost tens of thousands of votes. Speaking specifically with former President Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, and all the rest of Donald Trump's former opponents, she received nearly 13%. Now, the challenge for Democrats going forward is the uninstructive movement. They had a goal of getting about 20,000 votes. They got almost nearly 50,000 votes. And that, of course, was the movement, a protest vote of voters who are disgruntled, who are unhappy with Joe Biden's handling of the ongoing war in Gaza. So those are kind of while April's election is not really a key indicator of what we'll see in the fall, I think it still has some, warning signs for both parties come November.
Sure. Talking to operatives this week, they felt like those voters will come home, in their words. At least most of them will. The question is how many won't. And you're talking a state where 2020 was 21,000 votes, 2016 was 23,000 votes. So every bit helps or hurts. Now, some good news for Joe Biden. No labels. This third-party effort dropped. It's pursued a bit on the ballot across the country, so they couldn't find a consensus candidate who could win. That's good news for Joe Biden in Wisconsin. They had turned in enough signatures, if they were verified, to get on the ballot in the fall. So that's one thing to take away. Saw a new poll this week that had a head-to-head with Trump and Biden. Biden had a slight edge, slight in the margin of error. But when you add RFK Jr., Cornel West, and Jill Stein, Trump has a bit of a slight edge there. So that's what complicates things for Biden. Who will go somewhere else? And for Trump, the same thing. These Nikki Haley voters, do they come home in November? Were they there to show up to protest, to say, I don't like my choice? Like, what do they do come November? And can Joe Biden win those voters over and maybe make up for some other place where he's got some issues with his base.
Yeah, definitely both parties have some work to do until this fall. Also looking ahead to next week, the president will be in Madison on Monday, and it comes just off the heels of former President Donald Trump holding a rally in Green Bay. Of course, at that rally, he endorsed U.S. Senate candidate Eric Hovde, so that was some news there. But looking ahead to Biden, we don't know, exact details of what he's going to be talking about, but it once again just shows he wasn't here too long ago, and they're making a string of stops in the battleground state.
If you make a list of the states that Joe Biden cannot lose in November, Wisconsin is #1 far and away. Because if he's lost Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania are enough, right? So you look at the map, we always talk about Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, maybe Michigan, Pennsylvania, but Wisconsin's that tipping point. He loses here, it's pretty much over for Joe Biden. There's very few scenarios you can see where he loses Wisconsin but wins enough other states to win the presidency.
And of course, he's coming to a very Democratic stronghold city after just being in another one, Milwaukee, a few weeks ago. All right, that will do it for this week. Thanks so much for joining us.